Joining us from the capital, Harare, SABC News anchor Peter Ndoro. Very good evening to you, Peter. Nice to see you once again. Of course, after much delay, Emmerson Mnangagwa is now officially Zimbabwe's president.
Yes, indeed, Crisalda. Very good evening to you from Harare. It's a Sunday evening and I'm along one of the busiest roads in the city, Samora Machel Avenue. And to be honest with you, it's just an ordinary Sunday for most Zimbabweans in this part of the country. And it's been a remarkable day, as you saw from the package just before. It's been quite a journey for Emmerson Mnangagwa. A few months ago, literally November last year, he fled the country in fear of his life, and he came back to be made the president for a time until the elections. The elections happened, he won them, it was challenged, the court said no, you did win, and today is the culmination of that long journey. 4 weeks ago we went to the polls, and finally today he's been inaugurated as the third president of Zimbabwe. And if a lot of people might ask, why do you say the third? Well, the first president was Canaan Banana back in 1980, and he was a ceremonial president. The constitution was changed. Then we had President Mugabe becoming the first executive president, and now Emmerson Mnangagwa is now the second executive but the third president in the country's history. So a remarkable day, long journey, but he is now president.
Well, Peter, I know the exact spot where you're standing, and from what I can see, you can certainly tell that it's not much different from what we saw after the results had been announced by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Depending, I guess, on where you are in the country, have you managed to gauge what the sentiment is on the ground?
You know, from around where we are, Harare, most people are quite subdued. They're not celebrating. It's not a day of joy for them because this part of the country is very much MDC. They won 28 of the 29 seats in parliament in this particular area. So for them, they're kind of still trying to figure out how they lost the elections and how they lost the court bid. Waking up to just another ordinary day for them. But for the busloads of people that travelled from other parts of the country, they were packed at the National Sports Stadium and they were all very happy and enjoying themselves. And those that we talked to spoke at length about how the president had helped them, particularly in the rural areas, with seed, with fertilizer. And so they were quite grateful for some of the things that he'd done in the short period that he is sitting as president. So that might have swayed the vote for him in the rural areas. But I guess it's up to the future now, whether the people that didn't get their candidate to win will join this call by the president to come together as one, forget about the elections, and let's build Zimbabwe is his message. But
we seem to have lost SABC anchor Peter Ndoro there in Zimbabwe. Let's join now for some more analysis on what we saw come out of Zimbabwe now is Professor David Moore, who's a political analyst also with the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you very much for your time. We would have loved to chat to Peter a little bit more to get exactly what the sentiment is on the ground. But obviously today, quite a number of things that the President Emmerson Mnangagwa touched on. He spoke about peace. He spoke about quite tough on getting public servants to pull up their weight and quite a number of other aspects. But what stood out for you from the statement that he gave to the people of Zimbabwe, and I guess to try and inspire hope for many others around the world who are watching?
Well, I don't know if it's hopeful, but he had a Freudian slip. He forgot to welcome his two vice presidents onto the stage. That might indicate he'd like to forget at least one of them. Look, we had sort of the template that you get when you're trying to cozy up to the World Bank and the IMF. We're going to have clean governance, no more corruption, open for business, get people to work. He probably didn't emphasize as much this time as he did back in November, how we've got to get people to work.
Yeah.
So, he's very aware of the deep, deep economic problems. And I think he's very aware, too, of the difficulties of getting the MDC to come to the table. He sort of said, let's unite, let's come together, we're all one nation, we can work together, we can solve these problems, we can build this nation, we have a brighter tomorrow, brighter than yesterday, like another new dawn. So the MDC has said they accept the legality of the court decision. It's a legal institution, but they've gone up to the AU, somebody there, they're going to make their claims there, and they're going to have a meeting on Wednesday to decide what to do. I would think they have a couple of options: to go into a coalition which is less formal than the GNU from 2009 to 2013, which didn't really work for the MDC. They were put in ministries of social services and finance, and the finances weren't coming to Tendai Biti's hands. They were going through Obert Mpofu, who was Minister of Mines. Now, it's kind of interesting, too, that he said we will have, was it 0, 0, 0 corruption?
Yeah, Prof, before I get to that, I want to get to the crux of some of the issues. I want to talk about, prior to this election, during and post the election. Have we seen Emmerson Mnangagwa be able to hit the right notes, if you want to talk about inspiring that kind of hope of this new Zimbabwe that some have spoken about, in light of the fact that we've seen some of these US observer missions also say now that Zimbabwe has not demonstrated yet established a tolerant democratic culture towards the opposition, if I may quote. So in terms of your thoughts, have we seen that, him hitting the right notes prior, during and now after?
Prior, yes. I mean, we had the promises of the good election, and we had a decent election. Look, the bar has been lowered a lot since 1990, whenever Africa was becoming liberal democratic, which it hasn't done. So the bar has lowered a lot. During the election, there was, the usual free press issues, the state-dominated media, the radio stations, which are owned by ZANU-PF bigwigs, that sort of thing. Intimidation in the rural areas, but also what Peter said and what I heard this morning, people very thankful for their seeds and their flour. Well, that's patronage politics, that's giving out the gifts. There are carrots and there are sticks in the rural areas. The chiefs can line up the people and they know where they're going to vote, and the chiefs get their SUVs and secretaries. So, and I mentioned Obert Mpofu in the Ministry of Mines,
Prof,
right?
before we go there, let's quickly cross to Peter Ndoro. We might be having connection problems. Let's go back to him in Harare and just get what the sentiment is. We'll certainly have a chat with you straight after. Peter, I'm sure you can hear me now. Very good evening to you once again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, Griselda. Can you hear me as well?
Well, yes, I can. Well, Peter, let's get to the next question. I think what many people looked at the inauguration ceremony today was surprisingly, perhaps some might think, was the message that was sent by former President Robert Mugabe. Of course, he could not be there. He sent his daughter Bona and obviously said that he could not attend due to the former First Lady's ill health. We also saw the attendance of the MDCT's Thokozani Kupe. What do you make of that? Are we seeing a little bit of kiss and makeup here?
You know what, if there's one person I think who's played quite a strategic game is Emmerson Mnangagwa. I mean, throughout the last 8 or so months, 9 months, what he's done, he's tried to sell this story of a new Zimbabwe, one that is kinder, that is softer, and he talks about peace and love. And what better way, especially if your key message on the day is about reconciliation, what better way than to bring somebody who by rights really should have been last on his list, but he extended an invitation, and some would say that was a political masterstroke to President Robert Mugabe. He says that he was ill, he said his wife was ill, and so they sent to Bona and her husband. What was interesting is that as she came into the stadium and as she hugged President Mnangagwa, there was a huge cheer from the crowd. So clearly she represents something that's still positive for the people. It was quite an interesting thing for us to observe. Thokozani Kupe also got a huge cheer for her arrival, and she's been saying that, look, it's time for us to get on with it, time for us to build Zimbabwe. Now, if you're a conspiracy theorist, some people will say that she's sort of ZANU-PF in disguise because her mission was to split the vote, which she did, which helped ZANU-PF in some constituencies. But she certainly was talking reconciliation and on the same script as President Mnangagwa.
Well, Peter, after all the pomp and ceremony is done, of course, now it doesn't look like Emmerson Mnangagwa is going to begin this administration of his in a good way. You've got the MDC Alliance, which is not giving up on its challenge. It's taking its challenge now to the African Union body. And what sentiment are you getting on the ground? Of course, I did say, it depends where you are in the country, what people are going to say. But what is the sentiment that you're getting regarding that and the MDC's continued fight to ensure that it gets its way?
Griselda, to be honest with you, I think that people had their last hope in terms of the Constitutional Court, and there had been huge promises about the overwhelming evidence that was going to be presented. The Constitutional Court said, listen, you've not come with evidence, you've come with allegations, and you haven't really proved your case. There are irregularities, but you haven't proved that Emmerson Mnangagwa was complicit in that and that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission actually did anything wrong. So, one, I suppose, would expect that the MDC Alliance would take this matter further. But where they've gone to, the Commission for Human and People's Rights, this is an organ of the African Union which reports to the heads of state. And I just don't get the feeling that they've got an appetite for wanting to review.
Well, we managed to get the crux of exactly what's taking place in Zimbabwe now and what happens next. Peter Ndoro live from Harare on, of course, the inauguration of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Let's